Step into the light where the wild ones roam, where the heart speaks loud, calling this place home. We break the rules, we paint the sky, ridiculously you, we were born to fly. Ooh, ooh, it's ridiculously you.
Hey, everyone. This is Julie May and the Ridiculously You podcast. Welcome. Today's guest, you may know him from several different things, but you may know him as a former U.S. diplomat, a White House nuclear trade advisor, global strategist. But today's guest has traded in all of those corridors of power for something far more radical, and that is helping the individual with clarity, with self, with beauty and purpose. David Kincaid is our guest today. He is a walking paradox in the very best of ways. He is an intellectual, a mystic, a gentle disruptor, a world traveler, and a truth teller in an era kind of allergic to nuance that truth kind of requires. He doesn't rage, he doesn't scream, not in general anyway. He doesn't burn it all down, but what he does do will unsettle you in the exact way you have been needing. So I love that about David. Take a breath. This one's not going to be surface level. We are going to pop in with one of my brilliant favorite people on this planet, David Kincaid. So welcome. Thank you so much.
Hello, Julie.
All
How
right.
are you doing?
I am so good, and I'm so thrilled to have you on today. Let's start first off with part of who you are, which is traveling the world on spiritual pilgrimage. So where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining you from the far north of Germany in a town called Lübeck, Germany.
That's cool. So compare that to like major cities location wise. It is so far north or west or whatever of a major city they would know in Germany.
Yeah, I got a little foggy eyebrows going on here, so I keep seeing myself here. Yeah, so it's really interesting. I love that question because Rome is actually comparable to New York City, but people never think about that because they think of New York City perhaps as being cool or chilly, and Rome as being warm. But that's because Rome is on the Mediterranean Sea. So I'm about as far north as the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. So I'm on the southern. Yeah. So yes, exactly, for real. It is that far north. I like to say I'm on top of the globe up here.
Wow. I don't think I realized that at all. Like, no wonder it was chilly there this last little while.
Well, you think about like all those countries like Sweden and Finland and Norway, they're just north of me. I'm on the southern side of the Baltic Sea here, and this is a coastal town. And a lot of people don't even think of Germany as having coastal towns, which I think is great. And I love going swimming in the Baltic Sea, and I've done so a number of times. But yeah, we're pretty far north of here.
Wow, that's insane. So we're going to get into a little bit of your history so people can get a sense of who you are and this perspective you bring, which is a very interesting global perspective that I think a lot of people don't have. So you worked with nuclear as an advisor in the US government. You were in Indonesia as a foreign trade minister. You can tell me, like foreign trade advisor, tell me a little bit more about what your work looked like with them.
Yeah, so I'll start with my nuclear work. So for many years, like you said, I worked for the U.S. Department of Commerce and International Trade Administration. I was one of the nation's top nuclear trade analysts, and this is civilian nuclear trade. And so what that means is that we differentiate that from nuclear bombs, right? This is nuclear energy, and it's the friendly side or the terrific side, the positive side of the nuclear equation. And I worked with the White House and other interagency departments to help U.S. companies to sell nuclear energy products and services to foreign countries. And then you mentioned my diplomatic work. They called us foreign service officers or trade specialists. And there I was living in Indonesia, and I worked across about a dozen or more various industries and did a very similar function. But in that case, I was actually living in the country. And so we were servicing US companies interested in coming in specifically to Indonesia. And so we helped them to sell US made products and services to the Indonesian marketplace.
What do you think are the big things you learned about how our world works by working on such a global scale, like seeing commerce being introduced into different countries and into different
Yeah.
nationalities? You must have learned a lot about how the world works. What were your biggest takeaways in how our world actually works?
I really love this question, and I think about this a lot. I'm a guy who I'm able to make a lot of connections, and my brain just works that way. And I've had a lot of exposure in my life to history and to culture and to whatnot. And I have a master's degree in international affairs and economics with a focus in trade. And of course, I worked in the trade field for a long period of time. It's also appropriate that I'm currently in Lübeck, Germany, because Lübeck, Germany is called the crown jewel of the Hanseatic League, which is itself a trade organization. So the way I like to talk about it with people is that it's the Baltic version of what the Medicis and some of the trade organizations in the South were at a similar point in time. It's also really interesting that I was in Indonesia because a lot of people don't realize that our US history is directly tied to Indonesia. Indonesia is the East Indies. That was the East Indies company. Um, it was um, it was managed under the colonial empire of the Netherlands, and Maluku, which is a set of islands that's in the far east of the archipelago of Indonesia, was at the time the Spice Islands. And so when you think about the discovery of America, and whether or not you believe that Christopher Columbus discovered America or not doesn't really matter, because in the story, the whole point of a lot of that history is that Europeans wanted to find a more accessible route to those islands because of the wealth that was found there in terms of spice. And so, the trade story is a very old story. I mean, you can see in North America, you can see Indian artifacts from as far north as Alaska appearing and as far south as Argentina. And so this movement of people around the globe has always been an issue. So I think, when you ask, like, what have I learned? I think I've learned that trade is the great connector, right? Trade connects people and always has. There's resources all over this beautiful planet of ours, and people have wanted to use those to trade for other resources that were not in their areas. And that's become a source of power play. It's become a source of importance. I mean, it's no small wonder that there were colonial empires. It was a resource grab for trade and trade routes. And so, I think that my time in Indonesia really made this clear. The islands, there's 17,000 islands in Indonesia. And when you think that these people were able to trade even among their own islands, I mean, like, the motivation that it would have taken early people in Indonesia to be able to figure out how do they sail a boat from one island to the next on extremely rough and very difficult seas. So you can see that the desire and the draw for trade was extremely important to even those early people who then themselves became swept up in the spice trades.
So, how do you see trade working with governments now? Like, that's how it was a long time ago. Now we see things happening like, these tariffs coming in and governments
Mm.
doing all kinds of things to control trade. Tell me a little bit more about what you've seen along that route and how it affects us as people and what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, of course, everybody's up in arms about some of Donald Trump's tariff moves, and there's lots of opinions out there, and my particular opinion may not be so interesting or so correct, but I actually think that a lot of that is pretty interesting stuff because of the nature of trade. Like, I said that trade is really a grab for resources, but it's also a way of leveraging power. And so this move to shift the trade or the tariff structure on the planet is a power grab. It is states or nation states negotiating their relations with one another. And for some of those nation states, it's not going so well. I think our relationship to China is a prime example, We've allowed China to be a most favored nation under the international trade laws for a great many years, which means that China has received special trade status, means they don't have to abide by the tariff limitations that were placed upon many nations under that agreement, and and yet China has prospered a great deal under that. And so, a lot of people, and I would be one of them, feel like it's about time that there's a reconciliation of that relationship. And so I think that, China carries a lot of our debt. They're not the only ones. Japan carries an enormous amount of our debt as well. But China is the focus of a lot of people's attention. And so I think it's, about time that we even the playing field, like we like to say.
That's so interesting. So how do you think about the way that interacts with people who have, physical products, services, and businesses here in the US that have been negatively affected by things like that? I have a couple of family members who product source from China. That was like the main way they were getting products in. And then all of a sudden these tariffs come in and they're like, eek, there goes our profit margins. There goes competition. There goes all of these things. Because all of a sudden their source products are now, double in price.
Yes, exactly. Well, this is also not a news story. Ultimately, the Boston Tea Party in the United States was a result of a trade rule that was being broken by the early colonists. And the colonists then were forced by virtue of of England to buy only British tea. Well, there were a number of people, very wealthy people. John Hancock, one of our signers of our Constitution, or of our Declaration of Independence, was also one of those wealthy people who is swept up into the Boston Tea Party story. And they wanted to buy tea from the Netherlands, and the Netherlands traders were getting tea in China and going around England and coming to the United States and trying to sell it essentially on the black market. And so there was competition, right? And so the British didn't really like that, and well, we know kind of how that went. So that's not a news story, and competition is always a part of the game, the economic game. Even if we were to take it out of the nation state context and we were just say, like, in your neighborhood, let's say that you're trading bananas for fish, and you've been trading bananas for fish with your next door neighbor, and all of a sudden the guy down the block is able to produce better bananas than you are. Well, the guy with the fish is probably going to go to the guy who has better bananas. And so that's a loss of opportunity for you. But I see it more as an opportunity for you to improve your product, right? And so we have ways within our society of shifting and adapting. The problem always in economics is that in the short term there's a cost, but there's always a cost, because if we don't make that shift, then the cost is that we continue to buy crap products from China. And everybody likes to complain about the crappy quality of products from China, although China has become quite a producer of quality products as well, because of innovation. Even though we like to complain about that, it's a way of shifting the dynamics and creating more motivation. So yes, there are losers in the game, but every game has its losers. So, I think that one of the things that's so marvelous about the human being and our human society is how adaptive we are. And we don't talk about that as much. We don't talk about our adaptiveness. We are phenomenally adaptive. We're built to be adaptive. It's with no sense of irony that we are as weak as we are in the animal kingdom. I mean, we only have 2 legs. We don't do so well climbing trees or running that fast when the saber-toothed tiger comes roaring around. But somehow we've managed to live eons of time. And I say that's because of our evolutionary adaptiveness.
Okay, so talking about adaptiveness, let's talk about your adaptability once you decided this foreign service gig was not for you. Let's talk about that moment of time, because you had spent quite a bit of time working in trade, all this global thing. It looks like this big prestigious job. Like many of the things you've done have looked like these big prestigious jobs, and yet there was a point at which you sat in Indonesia and went, kind of like, fuck this, I am not doing this anymore. So, can you
Yeah.
take me to that time and tell me a little bit more about what kind of like broke that down and made you go, I do not want to do this even one more day right now, and a little we'll talk about your journey after that, but let's start there, because a lot of people go, I call it the golden handcuffs. It's they have prestige, they have money, but they don't love their job at all. They don't like what they do, but it's like it's the golden handcuffs of prestige and money. And so many people just stay stuck there and they just keep building and they think, oh, well, when I get the next advancement, it'll be better. Nope, the golden handcuffs just go tighter and tighter and tighter. But you didn't allow that to happen so far. You did your service, you did your job there, and then at some point, tell us what happened that made you go, I'm out.
It's funny you use the term golden handcuffs because I resigned to the day at my 10-year mark. And it is said within the federal government that at the 10-year mark, you receive the golden handcuffs. And I was kind of determined not to be handcuffed in. And so it was very appropriate that I resigned that day. Yeah, so I was living in Indonesia, and I had a phenomenal run in Indonesia. I was extremely successful there. I loved Indonesia. I loved living overseas. It was funny because a lot of people accused me of not being able to handle living abroad. I was like, actually, I want to live more abroad than this is enabling me. So it wasn't that. But Indonesians are quite poor. The salary disparity between the Americans working in the embassy and the Indonesians working there was quite significant and kind of shockingly so. I had the opportunity to go in some people's homes, and there's both ends of the spectrum there as well. There's extremely wealthy Indonesians, but the vast majority of people are very, very poor. And so, a lot of people. It's also a very young country, by the way. I don't remember the statistics are, but it was something like well over half the population was under the age of 35 at the time that I was working there. So yeah, this very young population, and these people were so excited. Young people were just so thrilled with the way that their lives were going, and there were dirt floors in some of their apartments. And yet they would come to work or they'd go to their jobs throughout the city. I'd observe them moving about the city, and they just seemed to have such giddiness and joy. Now they're kind of bubbly people anyways, and so maybe you could say that that's all fake, but I had a real sense of their relationship to life. There was one of my staff who was Indonesian had a death in their family, and I was just amazed at how they approached death in that society. And I had another staff member who had a stroke during that time, and her sort of love and zeal for life and the way that she just stood up and just kept on going was just really inspirational to me. And so I had to kind of look at my own life during that time, and I thought, I am not that adaptive. I am not that thrilled with the idea of poverty. And I was living in this extraordinary luxury. It was embarrassing. I had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment that was given to me by the federal government to live in during my time in Indonesia. I found that overly luxurious and really kind of embarrassing. And I also began to see that my entire being there in a travel sense was being completely focused and filtered through the desires of the federal government. And I didn't like that point of view. It's not that I disagreed with them head on. This is back to my sort of nuanced viewpoint. I'm not here to talk badly about the federal government, but it didn't match what I wanted. And I had long been on a much different journey of my own. And due to some circumstances in my life, I had felt the need to climb the ladder and get myself out of those circumstances. And so I noticed that I was willing to really degrade my body, my mind, my heart, my soul, in order to achieve some sort of sense of success. And I also began to see that the ladder up ahead was way longer and way more translucent than I had ever imagined. I wasn't ever going to get there, right? Like I was literally climbing out of a hole that had no end. And I can remember that I came home one day and fell on the floor in my apartment and just began sobbing. And all I could think about was that there's no way in this direction to go. There's nowhere in this direction to go. And there's 1,000 reasons. I've mentioned some of them. I wanted joy in my life, but I wanted to be the determinant of that joy. I wanted to travel in my life, but I wanted to be the determinant of that travel. I wanted to say where I go, what I see, what I experience, and how I get there. And so I wanted to be able to have that funding, that drive, all of that come from me, because I am the source of all of that in my life. And I didn't want the federal government to be a part of that any longer.
So you talked about degrading yourself in this pursuit of trying to reach. What did that actually look like?
Yeah, so I mean, we put in, I say we because I wasn't alone in the number of hours that I put in. Many diplomats, many foreign service officers put in extraordinary numbers of hours. They put in extraordinary intensity of effort and work. And it's a lot like drinking from a fire hose. I like to make the comparison. There's 335 million Americans all demanding something from their federal government, and in the International Trade Administration, there's 2,500 people worldwide who are servicing 107 cities and 77 countries, plus all of the industries that the United States has to offer. And that's simply not enough. The demand was extraordinary, and every one of us was trying to meet that demand. And so, bodily, that meant spending an extraordinary number of hours at work. I hired a person in Indonesia to go get my groceries, to cook some of my food for me, because I simply did not have the time to go to a grocery store. Now, in fairness, Jakarta has some of the worst traffic on the planet. And so it would often take me 3 to 4 hours to do a grocery shop run, even though the grocery store was basically like a mile and a half away. And, walking there, I could do that, but that would also take me an extraordinary amount of time because of the way that the pathways were and the means of getting there that I would have to have relied upon. So, that took a huge toll. I was in a relationship that wasn't healthy for me, and I wasn't healthy for it. And so I was suffering under a lot of loneliness, extraordinary loneliness. I was around all kinds of people. I was meeting people from the Indonesian government, the United States government, associations, business leaders, and then just everyday normal people, plus all of the Americans and all of the Indonesian staff that worked in the Jakarta embassy. And yet, despite all of that, I felt just the vast sucking sound of my own loneliness. And I wasn't eating healthy. I was up and down in my weight. I didn't, I tried getting exercise in to the best of my abilities, and I did a pretty decent job of that. But it just wasn't as possible under those time constraints. I also didn't have the focus on my health and well-being that I do today. And I've endured throughout my life, or I've traveled through a lot of addictions, whether it be cigarettes or sugar or food or drugs or marijuana or alcohol. It doesn't really matter what it was or is. Like these addictions are distractions from the joy and the love that is available to us as human beings. And somehow I knew all that. And I knew that there was a lot bubbling up under the surface for me. I had some trauma early on in my life. I had some trauma in my early 30s that was all undealt with. So those things were all catching up with me spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and I was no longer able to manage that. My integrity was out of whack. I just felt badly about many of the things that I did or didn't do or was forced to do or asked to do. And so it was all just imploding upon me. And all those things are very important to me: my health, my well-being, my love relationships, my relationship to myself, my integrity. These are very important to me. And I was saying those words, but I wasn't taking the actions to actually make that happen.
So you say, I'm out. This is it. I'm out of here. And you are in search of what? So you leave, you
Yeah.
want what?
This word search is so interesting. And I've had so many people ask me that even in more recent times. So there was a searching in the beginning. And initially articulated that search as I wanted to find myself. And my partner at the time even said as much and repeated that on numbers of occasions. And I would sometimes hear that said, and I was like, yeah. And now I can see that really wasn't what I was searching for, but then that is truly what I was searching for. I was searching to find myself. And I think what's kind of amazing about that is I was willing to go to any lengths to complete that search, to fulfill on that search. And I think what's interesting about that too is that one of the ways that I kind of emotionally experienced that search is I felt inside myself a longing, as though there was more purpose or more meaning to life than what I was currently experiencing. And I think it's a common malady of people who are in that mode, that they think that there's someplace else to go, or some other way to go about life that will give them that will satisfy that sort of internal itch. Little did I know that that was not true, but I think that the yearning was important for me at the time in order to motivate me in that direction.
What have you learned about yourself since then? You've been out of the service how long?
I've been out of the service, what, 6 years now? Yeah, 6 years
now. Okay,
Yeah.
so
A lot's
you
happened
left
in
the
the world in
service
6
in
years,
like
hasn't it?
2019. The next year's
Yeah.
2020.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So it was right at the end of 2018 that I left the service, and I first decided to go on a year of travel. And what have I learned about myself? Well, first of all, I've learned that there's no searching. I think your former question is really important, that there is no searching. There's residing in me. And I am the projector. The projection is all around me, the world around me. And so the way it shows up for me is really has a lot more to do with me than anything else. And so what I've really learned is that I have 100% of all the tools and all of the power and all of the love that I need in this life. And the challenge, or the work to be done, is to remove all the obstacles that suggest the contrary. And I've had some very difficult moments over these last 6 years. It hasn't been all rainbows and unicorns since then. But I think it's a really powerful lesson that I'm deeply entrenched in at this very time. And I'm loving where this adventure is going. I'm loving where this adventure has taken me. And I, a lot of the wrath and anger and rage that I had during that period has subsided and has been replaced with a real love of all those very same things. And that's just wonderful, to love within myself the very things that I hated, and yeah, that's a beautiful thing. It's a really beautiful thing to be at peace with oneself.
We put a lot of our identity, I think, in the United States on what we do. Like if I came and I just met you and I was like, okay, David, tell me a little bit about who you are. People generally start off with, this is the job I do, as if that is who you are. I am an architect. Yeah. An architect. I am a nurse. I am a foreign service minister. I am, like, that is, people take upon it as their identity, as you left your job in Indonesia, were there parts of that identity that you were afraid of
Mhm.
losing?
Yeah, that was actually a big struggle for me for a long time. And it's funny because in Washington, D.C., the first question anybody asks is, what do you do?
Yeah.
Nobody asks your name until they can ascertain whether or not you're of any value or import to them. And it's kind of a cheap feeling, actually. And, of course, not everyone does that, but it's a very common thing to have asked of you. And of course, I had answers for that. I went to my master's degree at George Washington University, and I was trained in networking and how to present myself professionally. And so I had well practiced my elevator speech about who it is that I am. And quickly, so the title diplomat or foreign service officer is very catching for people. And it's kind of telling because it's like from 1 minute to the next you can go from uninteresting to interesting by saying that. And I really resented it because I wanted to be seen as interesting all by myself without a title. And so I did have to wrestle with what that means to let go of a title and let go of sort of the importance of that particular role. But as I did so, I also began to see that that title and that role was being propped up by an institution, not by me. Like, sure, I had gained access to that particular role. I applied for the job. I was selected for the job. I was selected because of my past experience, my education, how I showed up in interviews. So I did all that work, right? But ultimately, the title only holds the sway that it does because there's an agreement internationally that a foreign service officer is this particular kind of role. And so the meaning is imbued into this title. It's like sort of embedded in this title. And I I knew that I wanted something different. I wanted to stand in my own eyes as valuable and not have my title be the determinant. But that didn't come right away. It definitely, I lost a lot of my contacts almost immediately. It's kind of interesting how connected or interested people can be in you at 1 minute and then the next minute they're not. And that was also decisive for me. It was telling for me to see, yeah, this whole structure is based upon my being in that title, holding that title, which is propped up by a government institution that I don't necessarily agree with. And by the way, as an American, I have the right to do so.
What have you learned about your identity since then? Because one of the things you said you were looking for when you left, or just throughout this, is that joy. The joy, just like these Indonesian people that you saw, the joy in just being, the joy in just like, even if somebody dies, or even when these circumstances happen around you, there's joy in just being. So, share with us a little bit more about what you've discovered about your own identity and what joy looks like now.
Mm. Yeah, I think we grow up in a world where we want to become astronauts and presidents and firemen and policemen and school teachers and whatever the title thing is, right? I when I get on the subject, I immediately think about a kid's book that I remember sitting and looking at with a younger cousin of mine, and we were going through this book, and I could just remember like the little cartoon characters, each with their little uniform, you know, and so there's this like we're socialized into this concept that you're insufficient as you are, right? Even as we go through school, right? Like I was always told I was a smart kid or I was talented or I was so, nice and pleasant and all these kind of things. And then that was followed by you should dot dot dot, insert some fabricated role here. And as kids, it's kind of it's kind of devious in a way because our imaginations are also on fire because we know so little. So what we're left with is what we make up about the world. And so my imagination was definitely on fire. I had a globe on a stand in my room next to my bed. I would spin that thing at night and just put my finger someplace. I'm like, I'm going to go there. Right. And so it was like, I always wanted to become. And I was so outraged by Michelle Obama's book on becoming because she took my title. You know, I was
So
just sure
rude.
she's so rude. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's my title. I wanted to write that title. I would never write that now. I would never write under that title because this kind of belongs to that category of what have I learned? There is no becoming. There is no becoming. This is the treacherous deal. There's no becoming more beautiful. There's no becoming more handsome. There's no becoming smarter. There's no becoming something other than who and what you are. And I was climbing that ladder because of an insufficiency that I saw within myself. Right. I was like to say that there's a purity of joy about doing the role of a diplomat would be foolish and a lie. I don't really know of anyone in that role who could say that. You know, every person in those roles is searching for something in that title, right? And that's not to say that that's bad. I'm not evaluating that right here. I'm simply saying that the title is so heavy, right? It's so weighty that you can't help but be searching for something, be reaching for something when you reach for that title. And I just don't need that anymore. I don't need for the rest of the world to see me as anything, right? Because like they don't determine my joy. I determine my joy. And you know, I fall into that hole sometimes. I'm not a saint. I'm not an illuminated Buddha over here. But I I have a really clear vision in my own life that who my identity is not determined by any category of person that you could put me into. I mean, some might look at me and say I'm a white man, although it's kind of warm in this room, so I look like a little bit like a red man here today. But but yeah, so I'm like a white middle class male, right? You know, and that could be a form of identity. And identity is something I've wrestled with a lot of my life. Um, but there's no need for that. There's absolutely no need for that because who I am as this being sitting right here today before you is whole and complete and perfect as it is. There doesn't need to be any becoming in order to. Right? This is the treachery of that thinking.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been trying to get in the habit of, like when people ask, who do you want to be 10 years from now? You'll go through, some sort of course. It'll have a visualization. Who do you want to be? What does that person look like and feel like and whatever?
Mm,
And I'm trying to get in the habit of more and more just really answering with like the very best Julie May I can be right now that feels most aligned and most joyful right now. If I continue to do
yeah,
that, because guess what? I don't have 10 years from now. What I have is right here, this
that's
moment,
right.
right now, talking to David Kincaid.
That's right.
That's what I have.
Yes.
So the more I can just decide, and the reality is, even Julie May is a title. Even Julie May is a label that I have
Yes.
decided to accept upon myself so that I have, some way to refer to self, right? But goal being today, right now, right within this moment, right now, I'm going to work on being my best self. And that is determined by me.
Yeah.
Your self is determined by you. And best to me, like right now, goes back to some of the things you've talked about earlier. It's when I eat well because I love myself, not out of shame or guilt,
Yeah.
but because I know it's going to support my brain. I know it's going to, support my body health so I can run and walk and do all the things. We were at Disney World all last week and I didn't have any pain any single day of walking. I don't know how
Yeah.
many miles.
Amazing.
We walked a lot of miles and I had zero pain.
Amazing.
I'm like, oh, this is why we do these things. But having the people around me that I love, standing up for the things that are important to me, all of those things, whatever it is in that moment, that's what I'm trying to answer more and more when people kind of get into this. I think people hyperfixate on past and future and have a really hard time presenting.
Yes, that's where I was going to go with that. I haven't been asked the who do I want to be in 10 years question in a while. But goodness, I don't know that I would answer that in a way that would get me hired. They may not like my answer. I might say something like exactly who I am in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? Because when who you are in the moment is who you want to be, or whether another way of saying that, I could turn that around and say it a different way and say, when you align who you want to be with who you are in the moment, then there's where joy lies, right? In that alignment with yourself, right? And so you mentioned eating well. And I think this is such a big thing for people because diets, right? We have this word diet in our lives, and we assume that that means something like something that we put onto ourselves that's about suffering so that we can have some other achievement.
Yeah.
Right. But diet is just a reference to the things you eat. Right. And so when the diet, when you are aligned with diet as the thing that you love, well, then you're really in alignment. And when you love yourself, how can you put something in your body that is going to harm that self? I've had to ask myself that a huge number of times in my life because I've put all kinds of things into this body that don't belong there and are harmful to this body. And I've apologized to this body. And I'm so happy how this body has played with me over this time, because I'm doing really well health-wise, and I have a lot of vitality, and I've mistreated it. And my body has stuck with me when I haven't stuck with it. And that's pretty amazing. And so I seek to be in each moment, what really lights me up. And because that's where joy comes from. And people may think that sounds selfish, but I'm telling you, when you don't take care of yourself, when you don't care for this, there's nothing you have to give. You don't have anything to give. That's selfish because we have so much to give. And so, yeah, I don't know what I want to be in 10 years. I only know now because there isn't any 10 years ahead of me. In fact, there's no 10 years behind me. There's only the memory I have, or the story I've made up about the memory that I have about 10 years ago.
So you've come like a huge way from where you were when you quit that job and you were just frustrated and probably mad at the universe. And you have such a sense of grounding and calm and spiritual awareness about you now. If you had to give our audience some ideas of some of the principles you've learned about being present and loving self and creating a life of joy, what would some of those principles be?
Yeah. What would some of those principles be? Well, I think that, we are very fixated today on how everything else makes us feel. And so I think I know one of the principles that I would really suggest that people look at is complete and full ownership of your life and everything that goes on in it. Right? This is your life. This is my life. The way the world shows up around me, I am responsible for. I can promise you that when I walk out onto these city streets with a smile on my face, I get some of the most fantastic looks. I mean, North Germans are not famous for smiling. They are very, very face puckery, serious people. And they are completely disarmed when I come with the presence of joy and fun and appreciation for the beauty that's all around me, but I come with that. I don't wait for the clouds to part and for the sky to be blue, right? I come with that. In fact, it's very rainy and cold here in northern Germany, and I love that. I love it. I love it when the skies are blue. I love it when the rain's coming down. I love it when it's cold. I love it when it's warm. I love it when there's a breeze. Because all of that is my joy to be had. And so by taking responsibility for everything that's in my life, I get to look around the world and see everything that's beautiful and see everything as beautiful. And so, so that I would say that's one principle that I would hope that people would take away. And another one is the giving up of everything as some sort of duality, right? The world is not completely broken up into black and white, good and bad. We walk around with this like measuring stick, measuring everything to see if it's just or right or the perfect way, instead of bringing our perfect way to the world. Right? We can complain about global warming or what's going on in politics or the economy. And believe me, the news gives us all kinds of fodder to complain about. We don't even need that. All we got to do is look at our next door neighbors' lives or our families' lives. But looking elsewhere in the world to measure what's right and wrong in the world is, again, this inside outside thing, right? There is, like, we don't know the story behind the story. We only see such a small spectrum of what we think that we know around us. And so giving up the knowing about all that stuff, just give it all up, accept it all as perfect, just as it is. It's going beautifully, going wonderfully. I'm learning so much from the world. I'm learning so much from the terrible things that I've done to myself. I'm learning so much from the things that people have done to me. I don't need to hate them. I don't need to hold grudges against them. I don't need any of that to move forward in my life. I can give it all up.
That's beautiful. Are you ready for a quick lightning round?
Yes. Here we go.
Okay, cool. Here we go. Quick. What is a controversial belief that you hold that might ruffle both the left and the right?
Controversial belief that I hold that my controversial belief that I hold that would ruffle the left and the right is that we don't need vaccines in order to survive this great world of ours. I'll just leave it right there. How's that for winging one out there?
Cool. What's a sign that you could notice in somebody else, you can notice in yourself, that that person is about to radically reclaim their life? Like they're on that precipice of just like owning their life again. What's a sign to look for?
Wow, that's a hard one. I think a good sign to look for is everything's falling apart and they're extremely vulnerable and they're just a mess. I love messes because messes are people who are breaking free of control and suppression of themselves. Like the mess is just bubbling over. And so they're just ready. They're ready for change. They're ready for it all to come in line.
I'm gonna ask a follow-up. So they're everything's a mess, it's falling all apart, and their attitude about it is because there's a difference between people letting it completely destroy them and the person who uses that to jump into the next version of themselves.
Yes. So they're seekers. They're seeking. They're constantly looking like, what am I going to do here? What am I going to do here? They're asking questions, right? Like, and but they also have tremendous fear, right? They haven't decided that they need psychopharmaceutical drugs in order to fix it all. They're out there in the question because those questions are so powerful. I was just a 5-year-old little boy. I came running out of my room. I'm like, mommy, it's not the answer that's so important. It's the question. And I stick to that. I was a weird kid. I stick to that till even today. it's residing in that question. And so people who are questioning seekers.
Excellent. Okay, what's the best piece of advice you ever took and what happened because of it?
Ooh, the best piece of advice I ever took is to let go of the identity of me. And it hits me like a hammer. Hits like a hammer, and not everybody's ready for that one. To allow the dissolution of the me and the I. It's put me on a trajectory that is, I feel it in my body. I feel my muscles letting go. I feel kind of an opacity coming about me, like I'm almost like I'm disappearing, but I'm not disappearing. I'm dissolving into everything. And I wrote a poem many years ago about how much I wanted to be at the bottom of the sea and to the highest mountain and into outer space and do this and that. And I'm finally seeing the possibility of getting my wish, because dissolving the me, the I, and just becoming the everything is my greatest wish.
I love that. What's your favorite country you've ever visited? Lived, you've been to over
Oh,
50 countries.
I have been to over 50 countries. Oh, I really hate that question because I love so many things about every one of these countries. Germany is and probably always will be my favorite, though. I love the culture. I speak the language fluently. I have such dear people that are here, and they are so German. And I love the variety. I love the history. I love the tragedy that they drag around, and I just love this country.
Okay, we have two more. What is a personal illusion that you're still in the process of unraveling?
A personal illusion that yes, that I cannot generate my own sustainability.
Mm.
I'm putting that out there. That's a big heart opener right there.
Yes.
I was homeless at a point in my life, and I have this fear that lurks in the shadows always, that I will not be able to sustain myself.
That's so real. Okay. If you could whisper one thing to any person out there, what is the one thing that if you could whisper it to their heart and have them really hear it, you would want them to hear?
Mm-hmm. That would be my mom. It would be, I forgive you, and have her really hear it.
That's so touching. I love that. Parent relationships, family things, they can be hard and beautiful and amazing and the most difficult things of all
Yeah.
time, all simultaneously. David, what final message do you want to give our audience today?
Give up looking at the news. Give up looking outside yourself. Give up looking at all those terrible stories, and get back in love with people, in love with this world the way that it is, and in love with you just as you are.
I love that. You know, with Ridiculously You, we're all about loving the most ridiculous parts of yourself and all the parts of yourself. We are big, beautiful, complex, unique
Yes.
beings, and finding ways to love all of our parts is amazing. If you guys loved this, which I know all of you did, interview with David Kincaid today, know that this is a part one. We're going to come back another time and we're going to talk more about, he's on a spiritual pilgrimage. He's next time I talk to him, in fact, I think next week you're moving off to Thailand.
I'm
Off
off to
from Germany
Thailand.
onto Thailand. We're going to talk more about his spiritual pilgrimage next time. We have so many things to talk about with David. He's a wealth of knowledge. Make sure you like and subscribe. Download this episode so you can listen to it anytime. with all of that, this has been Julie May and the Ridiculously You podcast, and we will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Share the spark, take it higher. Hit subscribe, bring a friend. Let the wildness never end.